And welcome to a special edition of the Michigan Football Breakdown focused on the offense with Al Borges. Looking ahead to the backyard brawl, Michigan versus Michigan State, as this is a game that my friend Gorgeous Borges got indoctrinated to, right? It was one of those games that probably, when you think of plays in your career, Al Borges, I'm sure plays that you're like, damn it, I wish I had that one over again. I
Yeah.
got to believe Michigan State is at or near the top of the list. 2011, Michigan State. I hate to rehash old memories, my friend, but first of all, let's just start out with how you doing.
I'm doing great. How you doing? That's my question because this is a week where your behavior is very suspect.
Hey,
I
man,
mean,
listen,
I haven't
listen.
listened to you too much, and that's been purposeful. I just want you to know that because I get enough headaches without listening to you on Michigan State week, which I know that'll just contribute
Well,
to the problem.
so you got to understand. This is a week that to me is less about professional decorum and more about fun, more about having fun this week in Ohio State week especially. And that is what an observer can put on the line. We don't coach, we don't play, we have no impact on the game. All we have to put on the line is what we say. What we say. And
Right. Right.
Michigan
Yeah.
State just historically in my lifetime has been a team that for the better part of my life, they've cheated their way to some success in this game. Not in the 2000s. There were some bouts
Mhm.
of unnecessary roughness, but for the most part, they took advantage of a down era of Michigan football and they used it to catapult themselves. And they've been around this range for a long time. But as you hear me say quite a bit, Al Borges, they're still Michigan State. Sparty is always going to be Sparty. And that being the case, my goal, my mission in life this week is to see how much hatred we can elicit from them, Al Borges. But you look, I know you don't want to participate in that.
Yeah, no, I'm going to stick with what you call professional decorum as best I can. You've obviously abandoned that and have every other year that you dealt with Michigan State and Ohio State, but Michigan State, Sam, I'm not sure that's where you wanted a crescendo, and then it just kind of carries itself into the Ohio State game, and it doesn't really matter whether Michigan wins or loses a game. It just if they lose it, it just perpetuates your lack of professional decorum. So, since you have made the concession that you aren't even going to make an attempt so that you can incite the fans, then I'm just going to have to learn, I guess, to accept that and pretend like I don't have anything to do with it, which I do whether I like it or not. Yet I refuse to participate in it. So
I hear you.
um, I'm just going to have to learn the one thing that I've learned you have to have if you're going to deal with Sam Webb, and that's tolerance.
Tis true, especially this week. But look, there's going to be a heavy dose of seriousness as we really legitimately preview this matchup between a powerful Michigan offense. No other way to describe them in the aftermath of pummeling Penn State, eviscerating, bum rushing, pile driving, curb stomping Penn State like you wouldn't believe against a defense, Al Borges, that is challenged to say the least. I mean, this was a defense, especially from a pass defense perspective, that was supposed to be better than they were last year. I mean, better is just be inside the top 100. Al, they're number 111 in the country in pass defense now. And I don't know that you fix that in an off week. So we'll get into the hows and the whys. Let's start off first with your personal recollection, your personal memories of this rivalry, your participation in it.
Well, first of all, they're going to play harder in this game than they play in any game that they play. That's the first thing that jumps out at me. You don't get the same Michigan State team that you get maybe in other games where they didn't seem to be as productive. They play with a chip on their shoulder. As we watched the video a year ago, that showed up quite a bit, and they will play this game as if they think they can win the game. And if Michigan doesn't play well, they can win the game. But um, I just remember that being a factor. I mean, a lot of extracurricular stuff. That jumps out at me, particularly my first year. There was just a lot of stuff that was not football. You know what I mean? It was nonsense, if the truth be told. But that, I think they would tell you, maybe, I don't know, that gave them a bit of an edge. There's 60 minutes of unnecessary roughness, I think they called it.
Yeah, that's what they
I
said.
didn't
You
I
remember
didn't
that?
think it was I didn't think it was the way the game should be played, but they won the game, so they get to raise the Paul Bunyan trophy, and they're right and I'm wrong, I guess. But those types of things, I mean, that's not to sell short. I thought Mark D'Antonio was a good football coach, did a good job of particularly defensively of having a base package, running that package, not getting too complicated, but having enough variation within their package to keep you off balance. And they had some good players, and when he was there, they had some excellent quarterbacks, some NFL guys that I think, and that seems to be the difference in Michigan State sometimes is when they have a quarterback, they're a good team. When they don't, sometimes they're a great team, but when they don't have a quarterback, they're not near as good. That's not an uncommon theme with any team, but
Right.
it certainly resonated, I think, with Michigan State when I was at Michigan.
Yeah, they could get after you. They had some good corners, but they left their corners out there on an island, literally. And they said, "Hey, maybe they won't hold up." There were some good guys, but you put guys on an island that much, they're gonna get beat. It's inevitable, right? But they kept saying, and they proved this to be true.
Mm-hmm.
You won't be able
Yeah,
to hold the ball long enough to take advantage of those matchups
right.
often enough because they could really get after the quarterback, and that is seemingly a difference with this version of Michigan State. Um, you mentioned the unnecessary roughness. It's just comparison's sake. You've coached in a lot of rivalries. You coached in the Iron Bowl. Was this you coached Michigan, Ohio State? Was this different than any of those in terms of chippiness or nastiness or extracurriculars?
Oh, there was a degree of chippiness in all those games, but it never resorted to 15 personal fouls. I don't ever remember that happening in any game. I think it was 15, maybe less than that. I might be exaggerating, but I know it was a lot of unnecessary roughness. And those games could get dicey, all
Mhm.
those games. I remember my first year with Ohio State. I mean, I think some kid got thrown off and was flipping the crowd off as he ran out the tunnel. And I mean, it was nasty, but it wasn't to that degree. I mean, it was really the turd bowl, the turd. It wasn't what I would consider a healthy football environment and a competitive and a good and competitive environment. But they felt it worked to their advantage. So you have to play the hand that's dealt you, and you just play and match their intensity and hope like hell at the end of the day you have more points on the board.
So looking back on last year's game, Al, this was one where Michigan State, and I've been saying this all week, they played Michigan's run better than anticipated, better than expected. They put the game essentially on Cade McNamara's arm, and Cade had his best day. Remember, I think it was 383 yards he threw for in that contest. But obviously, there were some that was a game where defensively they got off kilter a little bit in the second half. There was a touchdown taken off the board, and they couldn't quite get all the meat off the bone in the passing game. I think maybe it was Devin who said, "Hey, man, there were 500 yards on this field in that game," and lo and behold, the very next week, Aiden O'Connell for Purdue threw for like 530 against them and wound up winning the game. So I'm curious as you look at that game last year, what kind of stood out to you most about the the success that Michigan State had against Michigan defensively, kind of slowing down the ground game?
Well, two things, and not just defensively, but the other side of the ball too, is defensively they were winning some individual matchups up front that I would have never guessed they could win with that kind of consistency. Now that forced Michigan to throw more than they were comfortable throwing. Now, did they get good numbers? They did, but it wasn't their formula to winning all year. If you look
Mm-hmm.
at how Michigan won football games over the course of the season, it wasn't by throwing for 300 yards. It was by throwing for 200 to 250 yards and rushing the football. But in that game, Michigan State gave Michigan a tough road to hoe. On the other side of the ball, they got hit with a couple fast offense plays on running plays with Kenneth Walker and hit some big plays. Those, you asked me the two things that resonate with me the most. Those are the two, and there were other plays in the game. Don't get me wrong. I remember the quarterback. What's his name? I can't even think of it right now. But
Peyton Thorne.
Peyton Thorne threw an internal fade, made a great throw in a crucial situation. That one still jumps out at me. And then
That's a fourth
obviously
down.
the sack that wasn't a fumble that I thought was a travesty. That was not a very good call. But those things. But if I just took it from a technical standpoint, Sam, and got all that other stuff out of it, I think the individual matchups on the offensive line versus their defensive line talks back to me, and defensively the fast offense after first downs, running the football quickly, and before guys can get lined up. I thought those two things to me were the difference in the game.
Right. And so in the fourth quarter of that game, obviously Michigan still had a chance to win. An interception late. Seemed like that was maybe the one time you can credit their secondary with really making a big play. They made a big play on that play and kind of keyed into a tendency in that
Yeah,
particular game.
they had seen it was a smash corner, and they were the corner that intercepted the ball. I watched their press conference afterwards, and I listened to what he had said. And he had seen the same route combination earlier and kind of cheated on it. And he was in a roll up, and he kind of sloughed a little and baited the quarterback to throw the ball over his head. And he came running back, made a great interception. But at the end of the day, the ball really should have never been thrown there. But I see why it happened. As you looked at it and studied the game, study that play in particular, you can see why it happened. But the progression of plays had heightened the awareness of the corner, and he kind of baited him into making the throw. So,
Well, we know the difference in them offensively this year. They don't have Kenneth Walker, and Kenneth Walker was he covered up so much. He took pressure off the quarterback, right? He helped protect the defense. Now both are exposed. Setting Kenneth Walker aside, what's the biggest difference you see last year to this year in the Michigan State defense?
yeah, I don't know if you can set Kenneth Walker aside again. I think he was huge to help their defense, but they're not getting as much pass rush. They might be covering a little better, a little bit, okay. But last year they got more pass rush, so they still got big numbers on him. But at least the back end could count on them getting to the quarterback a little bit more often. But I think the issues I see with them, and these are just things as a coach the conclusion that I've drawn is they're basically a quarters team, very much like D'Antonio, right? But they play more coverages. Where with the old Michigan State was a quarters team and mixed in occasional variations off quarters, and once in a while a different concept of coverage. This team plays quarters and a bunch of other coverages. Certain games they play more than other. If you watch the Maryland game, they're playing almost cover 4 exclusively. But then if you watch the Minnesota game, they're in one high defense almost the whole game. You watch the Ohio State game, they're playing a lot of quarters coverage. But you watch the Wisconsin game, they're playing every coverage you could imagine. And we talked about this a little bit last year with Vance, is it's difficult to me, and again, I'm an offensive coach, but talking to defensive, to play match quarters, which is a lot of maintenance coaching-wise, and then mix in a ton of other coverages and expect to be good at match quarters or anything. And I think they're suffering from a little bit of that. But because they're struggling so much to stop the pass, Sam, they feel compelled to give you more looks. But with more looks, there's some sacrifice in execution. That's one conclusion that I drew. And the other one is that their safety play with regard to coverage is shaky. The safeties, when they're forced to do a lot of covering man-to-man, and they like to play cover 1. So those safeties have got to do some covering. And their corners are solid players, but not by any means lockdown guys, okay? They make some nice plays, but they get beat some. Well, you put that all together, and then of the loss of some pass rush, and a lot of that, too, if you really research them, they have had some injuries, in fairness to them. They've had a lot of guys get hurt. But just those two things are a recipe for disaster in terms of trying to stop a good passing team.
Mm-hmm. So they were successful in slowing, and it's all relative. It's not like they shut Michigan's run game down, but relative to expectations,
Yeah,
what you had
relative to
seen
what
from
they've been doing, I think would
yeah,
be probably, yeah.
yeah, you thought Michigan was gonna roll right over them, and that didn't happen in this game. In this game last year, do you feel like the O line, D line, run game, run defense matchup is more in Michigan's favor this year than it was last year?
I don't think there's any doubt it is. But again, that X factor of them playing above their head. But yeah, I think that Michigan's offensive line, first of all, to me, is better. With Timmy in there, with and again, I don't know what Trente's situation is, but those guys, I think they're just better. Are they a ton better? I don't know how much. You decide that yourself, but I think they've upped the ante athletically. We've said that already. Blake Corum is on a roll, Sam. He's on a roll. He's creating an explosive or two, maybe three every game. And add to that Donovan Edwards, who's always a threat in so many ways. Their tight ends have been solid, blocking at the point of attack. And again, I'm just talking about from a running perspective right now. They've been very solid, even with the loss of Eric Hall. I think they have not missed a beat, in my opinion. So that matchup on paper looks pretty good for Michigan, better than even last year. Okay. But again, that X factor on how hard Michigan State's going to play and the things they bring to the table, that game particularly, I think you always have to consider.
Yeah, and so you got some different things. You felt like they they were going to sell out to stop the run and say quarterback beat us. That probably is going to be the focus again this year. You also figure that they'll probably be understanding they are very limited with their ability to slow down decent to good passing games. Probably bend but don't break, which puts more pressure on your red zone
On your red zone, no
efficiency,
doubt.
right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
so that was something in the Penn State game early. 3 early field goals, Al, that sort of allowed Penn State to stay in it. If you look back at Michigan in the red zone versus Penn State, you look back at Michigan in the red zone this year. Give me your takeaways. I mean, I know they have some pet plays that they really like, but what do you see is maybe the thing that you would kind of focus on to kind of, hone that in the way that it needs to be honed heading into Michigan State?
Yeah, if you want to be, and I told you this before, but if you want to be a good red zone team, you can't depend on consistently throwing touchdown passes. Now, that's got to be part of your package. And Michigan's got a nice package of red zone plays that attack the end zone, which is what you got to do when you're in the red zone. But I really believe you got to be running that ball in there about half the time, okay, once you break the red zone. Now, what Michigan has done, and a lot of this was the Penn State game too, is they just didn't get in the red zone. They just scored from, which that works too. That works too. If you can limit your red zone opportunities by creating explosives, that helps your red zone productivity. But I think the big thing is, can they rush the football with the consistency in the red area that they do in the field? And if they can't, do they have ways to compensate for that lack of rush? Because it does get harder as you get closer, because obviously with a constricted field, the safeties can play tighter, the front's is less discriminate. You just have issues there. But if they just come in with a good plan, take care of that ball, and be able to run with enough efficiency to set up other things they want to do, I think they'll be fine. To kick a field goal doesn't kill you, but to kick too many can be very painful as the game stays close. Now, if the game, like we saw, they kicked field goals against, who was it, Penn State last week, completely outplayed them in the first half, completely. And then those field goals became touchdowns later on. Well, you got to come away with a ham sandwich if you can't come away with a steak, but you don't want to eat too many ham sandwiches. Let's just say that.
Yeah, they love duo anywhere. They love G lead in the red zone. That's been a play for them that Penn State blew up.
Yeah.
In that, and that's not to say that Michigan is going to go away from, but I remember thinking at that time, man, it feels like maybe JJ more in the run game in the red zone might be something if teams are triggering off their looks. And again, that's not me saying get away from what got you there, get away from what's been successful. But it just made me wonder, are we going to see them sort of add some more wrinkles where JJ kind of keeps a little more often?
I'll say this, I'd be shocked if they didn't. I would. And I think the red zone is a logical place to implement that stuff, because there's a lot of stuff you can do down there to compensate for that loaded box, whether it be with zone reads or counter reads or +1 runs, which he hasn't done much of. He hasn't done much +1 run. And just to describe, just so people who don't know what a +1 run is, that means now the quarterback has a lead blocker to handle a loaded box. Okay. That was something we did a ton with Denard and with running quarterbacks, it's a common thing to do. It's just something that you don't want to do a ton of if the guy isn't you don't depend on him to run the ball in your offense. Okay, but I would not be surprised to see something of that nature, maybe a +1 run or two. And just his base stuff they've been doing, Sam, the bluff runs, the counter reads, those types of things. Those are all good red zone runs because they supply you with bonus blockers that you may not have in the field.
Yeah, and again, that's not saying get away from what got you there, because I mean they have G led to a lot of touchdowns, right?
They have, yeah,
And
they
so
have.
I mean, what did you see on that play? Wow, how was Penn State able to? We didn't
Oh,
tell the
that was
story that
just
play.
that was an error by the fullback. I think somebody on your other shows contended it was a halfback. It was not the halfback. It was the fullback's job on a G lead is to insert behind the pulling guard and take an angle that's inside out. The fullback went outside right away, which gave him no ability to come underneath the defense. The halfback is instructed to follow the fullback. If the fullback goes outside, which he'll only do if there's a spill by the widest guy, that means as soon as the tight end blocks down and the guy spills, usually forcing the play with his outside arm. Now the guard will skip around the corner, the fullback will lead him, and that's when you outrun the inside linebacker to the edge. On that play, the fullback went outside right away and sent the halfback outside with him and left two unblocked players inside. The kick out got kicked right into the halfback. The fullback takes the back to the promised land on the G lead. He always thinks inside first, outside if it's spilled. And that's where I think the play was
Yeah,
at.
this is,
That play was
you know,
on the fullback, not the halfback.
yeah, and they don't
Sam,
have
of
like
all the plays that I've called in 30 years of coordinating, I have more touchdowns on G leads than any play in the offense, simply because it's usually run inside the 5-yard line. There's a reason for that. Now we're not punching those in from 30 yards away, but I've seen every scenario in that play, and I've seen that mistake made several times. And when you don't play with a conventional fullback all the time, those things can happen.
All right, so it. I just talked about JJ in the run game. That was to me one of the ways as we looked ahead to Penn State. I think I got a question. How do you think Michigan is going to loosen up what people thought was a good run defense? Right? Are they going to have to air it out in order to do that? I said maybe there's some of that, but I think JJ being very intentional about running JJ early would be a major component of that. Turned out to be the case. I never coached a game before, Al, but that turned out to be the case. They
Did
were
you
very.
you did stay at a Holiday Inn Express
I
last
did
night?
stay at a Holiday Inn Express. You're exactly right.
Well,
Hung out
good.
with Gorgeous
You're
Borges a
good to
little
go.
bit too, so I
Yeah.
could kind of see the thinking that hey, you establish him as a threat from the jump, you get him leaning, and man, he affected so many run plays in that game, right? Think he could have a similar impact in this game, but more so in this contest. I think the throw game, the ability to slice them up in the secondary where they've been extremely porous, right? Everyone has a career day against Michigan State throwing the football, seemingly
Mhm.
since last year, right? It just seems like it's set up for JJ to have a good day throwing the football.
Yeah, there's a few things I think that JJ will and can and will do in this game and has done in other games. Number one, let's start with the runs. Not just the runs where he keeps the ball, but also the runs where he carries out the fakes and pulls players out of the mix with regard to tackles, handing off a dual play and sprinting out of there and having two guys jump him, knowing that he's a threat if he pulls it, right? Those are things you don't see. A lot of people don't see as a fan, and we see once we go back over the video. And then obviously the place he does run the ball on. But where he's going to really help the team win, I think, is with the passing game because he's extremely capable. The receivers are extremely capable, and the line has proven they can protect. So he'll add that balance. I don't think, I think what they got to do is play their game. Play their game. Do what they do. They don't have to get out of the box. They don't need to throw 50 times or do anything. Oh God, they're all up there. We got to throw. No, if they do what they do and take care of the ball, they'll beat Michigan State. I'd be shocked if they didn't. But know that it isn't going to be easy. You go into the game assuming that they're going to play their butts off, and every yard you have to earn every yard, and you just get a good solid performance. So they'll win this one, but it may be close for a little while, Sam, just like Indiana, maybe, or Penn State, maybe close for a little while. And wearing them down in the second half like they did to those two teams may be the way you win the game.
So a match quarters team, man, you better have some corners that can cover for
That's
sure.
where it starts. That's what
You
all starts.
definitely
Yes. That,
definitely got to have some cover
that's what
guys on
all
the corner.
starts. Right.
But your safeties better be better than your average. Safeties are worse corner guy cover guys than corners anyway, right? But they better be better than your average safety in coverage. And I'm just telling you, Al, I'm looking at this Michigan State team, and if they can't get to the quarterback, and they're relying on their corners, to match up with Michigan's outside guys. I like Michigan in that matchup. And then you're relying on safeties to match up with Roman Wilson. I'm just, man, I like those matchups, man.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Roman could have a big day if he gets the coverages he wants. He could be. Remember, we said that because I just don't see anybody that can consistently cover him on most of the stuff he runs. He's got enough variations in his repertoire to, corner routes, crossing routes, digs. I mean, his variations are so you can't play one route. He's good once he catches it at advancing the ball, but that's going to be a matchup you want to keep a close eye on because I don't think Michigan State has a safety that can stay with Roman Wilson. So, and remember too, they do have formations where they can put Ronnie Bell in the slot too, which is a
Mhm.
very common position for him because he played it. That's what he played before. So, and he'll be tough to deal with too. So, if you see number 15 and number 12 out there playing nickel on top of those guys, and they're not bad players, but it's just a matter of time, I think, before Michigan wins some of those matchups.
All right, so I'm gonna do sort of a little role playing session like I did. And by the way, folks, we will get to your questions for Al Borges. If you have questions for Al, put them in the comments. I will get as many of them in as possible. All right, so start lining them up now, and I'll go back after the fact. But I asked Vance last week to, all right, man, put your coordinator hat back on, Al. Attack the Michigan State defense. You just watched all the games. I know you did. I know you watched all the games, right? So give me a game plan. So I know I didn't ask you to do this beforehand because I kind of want you to do it on the spot. Give me
No,
your
it's
plan
not
for
bad.
attacking Michigan State.
I would run at them what we run the best and make them stop it because we're pretty good at what we do. When you're not as good, you got to be more creative. But Michigan can run a dual play at Michigan State and gain yards. Find 5 different ways to run a dual play. They may be some ways that they've seen before, there may be some they haven't, but put your bodies on their bodies and make them prove they can stop a play that we ran 12 times against Penn State and they couldn't stop. Okay. And they supposedly had a great run defense. That would be dual would be I start with that play because that play gets run more than any of the other plays. I would continue to run your split zones and I would continue to run your horn plays, your pin and pulls, although pin and pulls have not been as prominent against uh, Michigan State. I would test that ground too to see if they can hold up on your tight end. Okay, because if your tight end could set that edge and get that guard and center, and whoever's pulling around, they're going to struggle. The other thing too, I think, just from a run game, again, take your best 3 or 4 plays, disguise them a little bit, and make Michigan State prove they can stop them. In the passing game, it's a smorgasbord. Okay, well, it is, and I'm not just based on what they've done and what
Right.
Michigan's done in terms of the efficiency of Michigan's passing game has been excellent. Their quarterback is throwing high completion percentage for big chunks of yardage. You have receivers that can get those big chunks of yardage. So I would mix in a couple play passes, but basically do what they do. Do what they do and test the coverage ability of the back end, test the pass rush ability of the front end. I would not go, I would not take any drastic measures to try and get too cute. Okay. I would play your game. I mean, Herb Brooks, 1980 hockey team. That's what he was told. Play your game. Play your game. And I think if they play their game and do what they do, they'll win the game. Now, that's not to say, Sam, you still can't mix in a play here and a play there, maybe a flea flicker or a reverse. There's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes they'll fail and sometimes they'll succeed. But having that in your arsenal just makes them more conscious that you'll do those things, and it can slow down the pursuit of the defense, even if it doesn't hit big. So there's nothing wrong with any of that. And as soon as I know as a play caller, every time you ran a play like that and it didn't work, every fool in the stands was yelling, "Don't get so cute." I've never in my life tried to be cute. You can look at me and tell that's never been much of a goal. But you have to do some of that just as part of your plan. Don't try and trick them too much, because I don't really think they have to.
So in the run game, you mentioned disguise duos and Michigan runs. They disguise their duo
Every
pretty well.
variation, yeah.
They got so many
They got so many ways
variations.
to
But
do it.
you
Yeah,
mentioned
that's not news.
you mentioned duo, you mentioned split zone, and they have a duo kick, so they have some motion involved in one of their duo plays. Obviously, split zone has H motion in it. Michigan State doesn't seem to handle
That's in a
motion
couple
well.
games. Yeah, that showed up in a couple games. Is adjusting to motion and getting your cleats in the ground in time to react to the play. It's one thing to adjust to motion, but another thing to get to the spot and then be able to see the picture and defend the play. And there were a couple games where they were late on the trigger and it hurt them. It hurt them. So that'd be another part, and that'd be another part I would involve. And this is, again, it's not out of the box for them, because they use motion. They have all kinds of variations of motion. That's another one. Another thing too, Sam, that you have to bear in mind is Michigan is not afraid to use tight ends. Okay, now the tight end in college football, in terms of an inline blocker, wing blocker, there's only a few teams that do that anymore. And Michigan is very efficient at using that second and sometimes even third tight end. That is news to a degree for Michigan State. Now, yeah, they saw it against Wisconsin a little bit, because Wisconsin's one of the other teams that are willing to do that, but they're not near as good at it as Michigan is. So I think that's another thing. 12 personnel, one back and two tight ends, 13 personnel, one back, three tight ends, multiple movements, motions, and running your base plays and making them prove they can stop what you do best.
Yeah, man, I'm trying to think back to some of the plays that were successful, and you felt like could have been more. I mean, I felt like the bingo cross was available a lot against Michigan State. Wasn't always capitalized upon, but they didn't cover the dig a couple times in
Yeah,
that game.
that's another one. Like a bingo cross and they're good at that play. And the cool thing about the bingo cross is it doesn't matter what the coverage is. If the quarterback will make all the throws to whoever the available receiver is, based on the coverage, the play is always a good call. You can't call a bad bingo cross, because if the decision maker is efficient, you're hitting crosses versus man, you're hitting basic routes versus zone, you're throwing one-on-one cuts versus blitzes. If he knows the play, and I think JJ
He
knows the
does.
play pretty
Yeah.
well, that's always a good play. Just their basic crossing stuff, because you are getting a lot of cover one. Any shallows, whether it be drive routes or chase routes or whatever, coupled with bingo crosses, all that stuff's good, and it's not bad on early downs, because they'll play coverages that are conducive to exploiting that. So I think the package is good. Few variations, nothing wrong with a few variations, but I think stick to go back to the womb if things get dicey, and I think they'll be good.
Well, I think the build up for JJ has been perfect for this game. And if you think back to last year's contest, JJ impacted that game significantly, and not in the way that when I say that people in the comments, I'm sure, oh yeah, he fumbled. Fumble wasn't on him.
Wasn't on him.
The fumble
But
that was
those are the things
lost.
fans don't know unless you tell them.
Yeah,
And
yeah. The
sometimes
fumble
we
that
don't know. We don't know unless we find out, right? We had to find out what that was about, or naturally people start pointing fingers until you realize it. That's why this show is this is where all the BS goes to die, Sam. Okay, because if we
except
don't
when we
know,
talk trash about Michigan State.
we're going to find out.
Except when we talk trash about Michigan State. We can inject a little bit of that, right, Al?
Well,
Just a
you're
little
going to
bit.
do it that way, but I'm talking about just all the nebulous generalizations that go with saying things like pointing fingers at the quarterback when it's fumbled, when you really don't know why it was fumbled. That's the BS I'm talking about. But in this show, that BS comes here to die, because we're going to find out why it happened,
Yeah,
or
no
we're going to
doubt.
know
And
just
and
watching why it happened.
yeah, so the fumble on the exchange, you had your running back not knowing it was a pass play, your quarterback handing it off. That's what led to that fumble. Now he did fumble one out of bounds
That was on
earlier.
him. That was on
That
him.
was
They
on
didn't lose
him.
that fumble, though. Yeah.
He did put the ball in the right arm on that play. But my point is, he had a first down run in that game. He obviously had the big touchdown throw in the first half. It was I think it was an RPO on that play, right? That he hit Andrell in the end zone for his second touchdown. I feel like his legs, his ability to hit every portion, every quadrant of the field, it sets up for this to be a JJ game. If the last week's game or the Penn State game was a running back game, and I'm not discounting their impact on this coming game, but I think this will be a JJ game. We'll come out of this game saying, man, he played outstanding.
Yeah,
Cowboys.
stretch him sideways with the run game and stretch him horizontally and vertically with the pass game. That's what he can do that not every quarterback can.
All right, so here, let's start getting to the question specifically. Mark Mikowski, I believe, said, discuss the Minnesota offensive success versus Michigan State, particularly what seemed early passing into tight windows, Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota RPO'd their brains out. Okay, they and that's Minnesota's game anyway. They're a lot like Maryland. Okay, only Maryland does it more spread looks. Minnesota's not afraid to use more tight ends, but they just really had some success pulling runs against loaded boxes and throwing the ball behind Michigan State's second level. Plus, they had some nice runs in the run game that made them respect the run game. And the two, being efficient at those two, is going to get you some big chunks of yardage. And that's really what they did to Michigan State. They just struggled to load the box and get away with it.
Yeah, he followed up. He said, looked like the MSU DBs play tight. Tanner Morgan, Minnesota's quarterback, smoked them, but was extremely accurate and threw off schedule.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I mean, he had a game, and after I watched that game, I thought Minnesota was better than they actually were.
Right.
Now I think they lost. Yeah, they lost some quarterback, but they were really good in that game. And I thought the play calling was really good in that game. And they had a great plan to attack MSU. And it may be a little similar to what Michigan does, but not totally. Michigan still has more drop back opportunities that they're good at that I don't think Minnesota's as good at. So, like I say, if they just play their game, yeah, maybe use a little bit of what they've seen, but do what you do best, and they'll be fine.
All right. Man, Mark has a lot of questions for you, Al. Likelihood Michigan hits on an alert in this game. I mean, I guess
it's possible. Always possible, man. Those are hard to call now. Those are hard to call because I'm going to say this, and I don't. The game where they ran the Dino post and hit Roman on the crash route. What game was that? I don't remember anymore. My point is Roman was really just an alert. He really wasn't huge, but he saw that read was a good matchup, and he took it. So you don't know sometimes that alert could come out of nowhere.
Yeah, because you're talking about it was a corner post, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it was a corner post to the short side, and he ran the crash, and he went crash. Crash was the alert. And he didn't even look at the Dino.
Never got to it. Didn't need to. Remember the dagger earlier in the season?
Yeah.
Same thing. He didn't. He hit the dagger. Why? What? Both safeties came blowing up. The guy was wide open, so he just threw the alert. So, do you think he'll hit an alert? I guess he does. He will by the end of the game, and if he does, it'll probably be a big play.
Yeah, I mean, the dude has done it basically in every contest but Penn State. I don't recall him hitting on an alert versus Penn State, but every other game.
I'm just excited that a fan called and asked about an alert. That
they're paying attention.
Advanced fandom right there.
Hey man, high IQ fans, high IQ fans.
Oh, Sam, you kill me every time I ask you. I say, Sam, you think we should dumb it down a little, man? This stuff's getting. You go, no, don't insult their intelligence, man. Don't. And when you get a question like that. Yeah, you're going to get the whole package. We're emptying the drawer with you guys, whether you like it or not.
Hey, we aren't proselytizing to Sparties right now, right? We aren't preaching to Sparties.
Under no condition.
Preaching to high IQ Wolverine. Hey, look,
we accept
the Sparty guests who are here today, but this is rivalry week, so we got to throw a few barbs in there. Don't get in your feelings. All right, let's get to another one. All right.
You had to drag that one right back in the gutter, didn't you? I knew you would.
Hey, man, I can't help myself. All right. Do you think, here's another one, Al. This sort of hits on something that we got into earlier from Kenzo 3. So do you think they'll have some new plays drawn up for the red zone? This is where I think, like I talked to you about earlier, JJ in the run game more involved in the run game in the red zone might be something we see.
Yeah, I think plays maybe, concepts not so much. What do you mean by that, Coach? I think conceptually they will be things that the players are familiar with. Okay, but it may be a play that's a little different. Okay, maybe a different way to run a counter read with a quarterback. Maybe a different formation, right? Something like that. Maybe a different way to run a bluff zone.
Hmm.
If you want to run the football, maybe like they like the wheel post with the crash route type deal. Maybe draw up a different look for that one. But my point is will they have new plays? I'm sure they will. He'll always introduce a couple, but conceptually, it'll be something that the players are familiar with. So you won't be reinventing the wheel with a play.
Yeah, I mean, they're great at that. They're
Yeah, they
great
are.
at
They're really
giving you
good.
the same play from a lot of different looks. Like
Mhm.
you won't know what's coming. I think back to the the counter reverse they ran versus Iowa.
Mhm.
I don't know that we had seen that to that point, right? That was the first time we had
I've
seen that.
never seen it. Not in
But
2 years.
at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's
Right.
still counter action with the reverse attack.
And what did they do the next week or 2 weeks down the road? They ran the same reverse with the same targets from snug formation. They pulled everybody in. So the defense didn't say, here it comes. It was a completely different look. So I would not be surprised if there's some of that in this game.
All right, let's get back to the questions and put them in the comments. We'll roll through them with gorgeous Borges over here from Munir. Says, hey, Al, I know Michigan State hasn't been good this year, but they did get some guys back. Slade, Henderson, obviously being the two most notable. If they
Mhm.
play the way they did versus Wisconsin in the second half and overtime, how do you see this game going?
Michigan will win because Michigan's not Wisconsin. And I'm not saying that to be a wise guy. I'm just saying that uh, they may play better, but Michigan is a much more formidable opponent. If Michigan plays their game and does what they do, I don't think it's going to matter. But you know how these things are. It's a rival game, and put the ball on the ground a couple times, something goes wrong, you're not running the ball like you thought you would. All of a sudden, you're in a battle. But just on an even playing field at normal circumstances, they've got a couple guys back that'll help. But I don't know if that's going to be the difference in this game. I think Michigan is going to be on a mission in this game, and uh, I think that they haven't beaten a Mel Tucker team yet, have they?
No, they have not. No,
Yeah,
they have not. They have that, and look, he wrote it to $95 million, Mister. I'm about to call you Mister Wide Tribe,
I got
Mister
a coaching
Borges.
too early, Sam.
$95 million.
Get
It
right.
is their Super Bowl, so
Yeah.
it is all on the line for them and for
Is
him.
Kenneth Walker getting residual checks on that or
He
no?
should.
No.
Hey, Jim too. Jim should get him too. I mean, those are the two guys responsible for that check right now.
Oh
All
God.
right. So here's one, Al. We've talked about this. Play action will be our best friend. Have you guys tried to play action success this year? I know the numbers are outstanding. They haven't been a heavy play action team with JJ, but it seems like they've started to do it. They've started to ramp it up gradually. At least that's how it feels. I don't have the numbers to back that up. What say you?
Yeah. And I don't have them in front of me either, but I've got them from every game. I could pull them up if you give me an hour or so, but you don't have an hour, so I'm not going to do it. But the play pass game for them is not featured as much as it was a year ago. I'll say this, but when they've done it, it's been really, really good. Uh, the stare routes, we've seen those several times. Off of waggle or off of just basic 7-man play pass protection.
Well, hold on.
We've seen that.
You said waggle. Now your waggle and Michigan's waggle, those are different. So
Yeah, no, I
what do
know, I
you
know.
mean by waggle, Al
Well,
Borges?
where they protected, they fake one way, go the other way, but protect the edge. To me, a naked is when you don't protect the edge. So it's very, very similar. But what it does is that they run protection, Sam, that give them a chance to see downfield throws. We talked about one a couple weeks ago, the naked stay play, where the tight end doesn't go on a slide route. It doesn't go, he blocks so that the quarterback can pull up and make the throw. That's similar to a waggle. But what they've done it pretty well. They've missed a few, but when you're trying to take chunks, and it ain't going to be 80% completion when you're throwing the ball more than 15 to 20 yards down the field. But they've been pretty good at it. But again, as much as I'd like to see them play pass more, maybe that's not them. Maybe they are more of a comfort zone where the quarterback can take drop backs, can drop back within the confines of the pocket without having to go in through all the mechanical play actioning and just see his throws right off the top. Now those have to be read better because you're not jerking defenders, but it may be a comfort zone for him. And when they've done it, he's been pretty good at it. So I'm not sure they need to run 10 play action passes in this game, but I would be surprised if you don't see at least 4 or 5.
All right, here's a more of an observation that I think is looking for a response for you. Our 12 personnel would be tough for Michigan State in this contest. I do think tight ends will be big, obviously in the run game, but in the passing game, we keep talking about matchups in the core of their defense with linebackers and safeties having to cover slots, but and tight ends. Al,
Yeah,
I
I
think that
love what Michigan.
this
I love what Michigan does with Luke Schoonmaker. I just love it because it reminds me so much of the NFL. Luke has become to me a complete tight end. Okay, his blocking from the middle of last year to this year is just taking a quantum leap. He handles a guy in front of him. He's reliable, but that's just one dimension because when they really want the point held hard, they put in Honeford and they let Luke move. Okay. Well, when Luke's moving, he has multiple facets to him. They have expanded his passing tree where he's running a variety of routes where he can work on nickels, he can work on linebackers. I'm not sure Nick couldn't beat a corner or Luke couldn't beat a corner if the occasion would arise. But he's return routes, shallow crosses, corner routes. They just have ways to feature him that a lot of college teams don't with their tight end and still be able to block too. Because it's hard to find a tight end that's a really good blocker and a really good receiver. There just isn't a lot of them. So usually one's much better at one than the other. But I would be a little surprised if Luke didn't play a big part in this game.
All right, Terrence Williams. Will we see Donovan Edwards in the slot possibly? I definitely think we see him split out at some point in this contest. But you think we'll see him in the slot specifically?
Yeah, you might see him in the slot. Now we saw him in the slot last game when they ran the quarterback counter. Remember the count? He was the one that they were riding on that. So but he came in motion back into the backfield with some fly action, and then they rode him in and read that defensive end. He has been in the slot a few times this year, but I think that's probably the next step because that's what they were doing with him later in the year last year. Is they weren't just taking him out of the backfield; they were using him in the slot or wide receiver, trying to exploit some matchups because Donovan is a different kind of back. He has wide receiver type skills. Okay. He has the ability to go out there, much like Marshall Faulk did. He could run a skinny post and run it right, where, spend that time with a halfback, you don't usually do it, but he could do it because he just could be a receiver. I mean, they could move him to receiver and he'd be one of their better receivers. I would never want to do that because he's too good a runner, but just exploring those options with him, putting him in the slot, motioning him in empty, lining him up at flanker, and sometimes maybe just to decoy him, Sam. So other guys, hey, there he is, and all of a sudden the attention falls off somebody you want to throw the ball to. So I look for all those things in this game and in the future.
All right. So I'm trying to remember. Zayden says Michigan did a few screens last game. I thought you said they weren't going to do them at all. I don't remember running back screens in that game.
There weren't. Well, I guess it depends on what you're calling a screen. They will always bubble.
Oh yeah, bubbles.
They will always bubble. They don't slip screen. That's just not one of their deals. They ran a shovel pass that got defended a little bit. I'm not sure. And then they ran on the third down. They motioned Donovan back, and then JJ made a bad throw, but it was really well designed. But it was more of a bubble type thing. And if you want to call a bubble a screen, I guess, yeah, they've done that all year. But they're just not really a slip screen team, a team that puts the back up in the line of scrimmage, lets everybody rush and sneaks behind them and put linemen in front of them. That they just don't do much of that. So,
all right. Here's where you're getting kind of specific. We aren't attuned to the game plan, but I don't think you'd be opposed to this, Al Borges, just because we see more 2-back sets with Blake and Donovan.
Well, you saw it, like I said, on that quarterback counter. Mm-hmm. That was Urban Meyer. I saw him evaluate that play. We did a much better job. I just want you to know that. But I'm just kidding. But that was a 2-back play, okay, with both of them in there. But that's not really – Urban called that 21 personnel. That's really – 21 personnel would have a fullback in there. When you have 2 halfbacks in there, that's different than having a fullback and a halfback because generally those two halfbacks are in there to do halfback type stuff. When the fullback's in there, he's in there to do fullback type stuff. So I can see them using both of them in some capacity that way, but not a lot. I can see that being maybe one, two, maybe three times during the game where they've maybe put Donovan out in the slot with Blake in the backfield or vice versa or whatever. I can see a little bit of that, but I don't think that's going to be something you're going to see 20 snaps of because Donovan really isn't a fullback type, and Blake certainly isn't a fullback type either.
Here's one from David Giovanni. Tempo. What are the percentage they're going to use it? Again, very, very specific question. We don't know, but Michigan isn't really a tempo team outside of 2 minutes.
No, they're not a tempo team, and I wouldn't hold my breath till they started being one. Yeah, I don't think so. You never know. We always had it. We did it some, but it wasn't. When I talk about tempo, teams that really want to run tempo want to run 75 to 80 plays a game, and don't really care much about time of possession. That's it. But if you're like Michigan, where you are indeed a ball control team with the capability of taking chunks of yardage, tempo just isn't a big part of your plan usually. And fans love it, and I know all that, but I'm not sure that's their culture. So it's like asking for screen passes. You know what I mean? Oh, look at those guys run screens. Look how good they are at it. Look at those guys scored 50 points in tempo. Well, it's probably because those teams, that's their culture. That's what they practice from day one, and that's what they want to be. I'm not sure Michigan wants to be that.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure who Harry is focusing this question on. He says Sparty running attack is not so good this year. Should we expect 50 passing attempts on Saturday? I guarantee you won't see 50 passing attempts from Michigan. Might you see 50 pass attempts from Michigan State? I don't know if that's where he was going with the question, but either side.
My answer to that, Sam, my answer to that is I hope so. I hope so, because if they got to throw 50 balls, they're in trouble.
Yeah, quarterback is gonna.
Oh God, I had a question on one of our breakdowns. A guy asked, "It's nonsense that you can't throw 50 passes and win." Well, I quoted him a statistic where the best quarterbacks in the NFL won 19 games and lost 55 throwing over 50 passes a game. It just isn't a good recipe to win football games. Now, it's happened, but it isn't what Michigan State wants to do, and it certainly isn't what Michigan wants to do. So you want to be balanced, as much as you possibly can. A year ago or a week ago, I did a statistic on the top 10 teams, undefeated teams, and the average passes per game with 32.6. That's about right. Now, Michigan doesn't throw quite that many because they run the ball a little more, but that's what you want to be. You want to have balance, but you don't want to be a passing circus because that usually gets you beat.
Yeah, I know you watched the full game, so I'll have you chime in. Obviously, we'll be with Vance at 4:30 today. He'll give you the defense versus offense matchup, but I'll get your take on it out watching both sides of the ball. What do they do well? What does Michigan State do well defensively?
Well,
Right?
I think their linebacker play is pretty good. I think 27 is a pretty solid guy. He's the guy that'll handle a lot of the perimeter adjustments. He'll go out and walk out on guys if you get in 10 personnel. That's Cal Holiday, I think. Holiday, is that who's there? Cal Holiday. He's not a bad player. Slade, if he's healthy, and there's some talk that he might be, he's a good player. Now, he played earlier in the year, and I think he will provide them with a little more pass rush and play hard.
Yeah, he gave Michigan problems last year.
Yeah, he's solid. And their corners, I'm telling you, they're not bad players. They're not great players, but they're not bad players. And if they're not isolated all the time, I think they can be effective. So
if they aren't bad players and they're getting torched, sounds like they're getting bad coaching.
Well, bad coaching, they're not much pass rush. One of the two. Yeah, because sometimes the best corner in the world can get beat if he's got an hour to throw the ball. So I don't know. I'd have to see the individual incidents to draw a conclusion on that one. But I mean, I don't. One thing I believe is the first law of warfare is to never underestimate your opponent. And I think, based on my experience in this game and seeing what's happened the last 2 years, you can't just assume because we're 7-0, we're going to come here and smoke these guys, because this is not a normal game. This is not Rutgers or Maryland, or these guys have a chip on their shoulder. They come and play different against Michigan. So I think if our team just assumes this is going to be a tough game, which they will, I don't have any doubt, it'll turn out the way it's supposed to.
All right, here's another one. And what do they do well on offense? Before I want to get your take on
Well,
Michigan
Peyton
State offense.
Thorne, they got good receivers. Peyton Thorne is a good quarterback when he has time to throw the ball. He's been getting beat up this year, though. Boy, I've watched a couple games. Oh man, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, and they are kind of my worst enemy. So, uh, but can be a very effective passer. He stands in the pocket. He's fundamentally pretty good, and their wideouts can make some plays. Their issue is they can't run the ball very well, and they're putting too much on him. That's happened in, I don't know, darn near about every other game I watch Michigan State play. They're putting too much on Peyton Thorne, and if he can throw 32 or 35 passes, run the ball with a decent amount of consistency and respectability, then I think he can be an effective quarterback.
All right. Here's one. We focus a lot on Slade, but dig into the Michigan State defensive line. Darren Graham says, what do you make specifically of the Michigan State defensive line? I find the matchup interesting in that, unlike Penn State, Sparty has multiple 300-pounders at the defensive tackle position. Do they potentially slow us down? And this was one of the most surprising things to me, Al, to have a couple of 300-pounders in there. Those guys get moved off the ball some.
Well, Burrow, number 8, Simeon Burrow, is and they don't play with a 3 technique and a nose. They both have to kind of play that position because they kind of play left and right. He can be a good player, but he gets tired sometimes and doesn't should be replaced because he's tired and he's not playing as hard as. But when he's fresh and fired up, he's not too bad, and I like him. Um, uh, 26, right, the defensive end. I think he was formerly a halfback or a running back, if I'm not mistaken, and looks very athletic. But I think he, against the tight end, our tight ends, is going to play hell defending the edge on them. I think I love that matchup. That one jumped out at me. Derek Harmon, who is also an inside tackle that plays 3 and nose, depending on what it is, plays hard, but he got ejected a little bit against Ohio State. Because Ohio State can be very imposing up front when they want to be, and he got knocked around a little bit against them on a few running plays. But he's not a bad athlete, but he to me is vulnerable against our guards if they play like they play. Now, if Zenter plays like he played a week ago, I like that matchup. Um, they've played a lot of guys at defensive end because they've had some injuries there. And again, we got to see if Slade's back. Jalen Hunt, I've seen out there. Michael Fletcher, number 5, I've seen out there. Now, the guy that's the most interesting to me is number 4, Jacoby Wyndham, because he has played defensive line, which I think he's going to play in this game, one of the edge guys.
Mm-hmm.
And he's
Yeah,
played
he's got
inside
a guy from
linebacker.
UNLV, right? Didn't he come
Yeah,
off
the
from
guy from
UNLV?
and he played inside linebacker, where I think he played at UNLV. I think he was inside linebacker, but he played. I believe it was against Wisconsin. I think he was an inside linebacker the whole game, and against Ohio State, I think he was a down guy. So he can play edge and stand up. But the guys they really want to play inside are Cal Holiday and 13. I'm not sure how to say his name. What the hell is it? Um, I don't see it.
I'll find it. I'll
Sir,
find
Sir,
it.
Sir, I'm not going to say it. I'll just butcher it. But number 13, number 13. Those are the guys they want to play in there. Those are guys they want to play in there, and I think they're both pretty effective. But I like 27 in terms of his versatility. But their D line is good. I mean, they're not bad, but they've been it's been like a mash unit every film I watch. There's different guys
Oh,
starting.
okay. Now I know who. Okay, Ben Van Summeren. He was the
Summer, yeah,
Michigan
Van
guy.
Summer, yeah, Van Summer,
Yeah. All
Van
right.
Summer, yeah. He plays the Mike linebacker. If 4 isn't playing the Mike linebacker, but 27's always in there. 27 stays in the game even in nickel. So
Okay. All right, Al. We got another one in here. This one from good friend Ben Krasner. And Ben Krasner said, "Hey guys, let me pull this up." He said, "Hey guys, can you talk about the benefits and challenges of playing a game like this after an off week?" Now, here's the thing: both teams have to deal with that, as both teams were off last week. But Al, the benefits and challenges of coming off an off week.
Well, getting better, I think and that helps Michigan State probably more than it helps Michigan because they've got more guys injured. That's one thing. Number 2 is 2 weeks to prep, and a lot of coaches salivate at that, and, "Oh god, I can throw the kitchen sink at them," and you gotta be careful not to fall in that trap because I have. You got 2 weeks to prepare, 2 weeks to think of ways to beat them. But sometimes that's too much time, and you might get away from some of the things you've done so well. So you got to be careful, but that is an advantage. You got more time to block 4-2 cover 4. You got more time to block nickel, one robber. That you got more time to see those things. And so you get more practice time, more preparation, which can be good, but it might be bad too. But I think just a chance to decompress a little, get your guys back, and come into a game where you're fresh and fired up. I haven't played in a week. Coming off the Penn State win, we are ready to go. You know what I mean? Let's go, man. We had a whole week to rest. Let's go. So, but again, Michigan State was in the same situation. So we'll see.
Yeah. So Mark is back. He said, "What happened to the reverses last week? Something else worked better?" Yeah, everything. I mean, what else you want to Mark? I mean, damn, bro. What else you want to see?
Sam, that
Everything was
goes
working, man.
yeah, don't let perfect be the enemy
The
of the
enemy of
good.
the good, Al.
Yeah, well, if you're kicking the hell out of them, why would you want to waste a reverse? You might be able to run in another game.
Right, dude. Damn. All right,
Right?
let's
I
keep.
mean, I got hell. Now that's the ultimate right there. And as a play caller, I can relate to this. Is you just ran a pin and pull that Donovan, you know, hit his head smack on a goalpost. He's still recovering from that. He needed a
Yeah,
win.
leave it
He
to a
ran
dude
a
named
dual.
Sam to make the point I just made. He said, "You're running for 418
That's
yards.
my point.
Why
I
you
mean,
sure reverse it?"
Blake ran a duo play and he's still running. I mean, if you looked at you went out to Michigan State, you'd see Blake still running. Okay, but so I mean, those plays are killing them. We don't need to get tricky at that point. You don't need to get tricky. If you usually I like reverses and such early in the game when the defense is real fired up and such. But at that point, they're just pounding them. I mean, keep pounding. They weren't holding up. You know,
Yeah, we got a question here. I try to find it. Someone said to you, "Do you think Michigan will run it up if they have the chance?" So I meant to pull it up. I apologize for not being able to find it now because so many questions have come through.
we don't need
Let
to
me
see
just say,
that.
yes,
Yeah, who's
yes, they
making the
will have.
decision? If Sam's making the decision, that's a no-brainer. Okay, okay. But anybody with a level head and a reasonable thinker will just do what they do. I'm not going to score any more points on these guys than I would anybody else. But uh, I don't know. Harbaugh might be more like Sam. I don't know.
I think in this one you will be out.
After losing to him 2 years, he might want to make a statement. What did Woody say? He goes, "Why'd you go for 2?" And his response was, "What? Because I couldn't go for 3." That may be one of these games. I don't know. I don't know.
Right. So let me pick up on the other part of the question. I asked you to game plan attacking Michigan State. I asked Vance the flip side, self scout, attack me. So, do you think MSU can scheme to make JJ uncomfortable? How would you do that, Al? I mean, if you're Michigan State coming into this game, you got to try to stop something, right? What are you trying to stop, and how are you trying to do it?
Okay, here's the key to that. If he's playing behind schedule and he's not, if it's 2nd and 10, if it's 2nd and 11, if it's 2nd and 9, if he's behind the chains and they're not getting in reasonable down in distances on later downs, they can do that because they can be a little indiscriminate with their nickel package and make him uncomfortable. But if Michigan is running the football the way they've been running the football and staying in makeable or reasonable third down situations, good luck because the only one that's going to be uncomfortable is the defense because he with 3rd and 3 he's not going to be uncomfortable. With 3rd and 10 you can make him uncomfortable. Early downs they mix run and pass enough where they're not so quarterback dependent that they can consistently confuse him. But if they can get him behind the chains, that's where that could be a factor, in my
All
opinion.
right. And so Corey Smith said, I haven't seen JJ climb the pocket. Is that the reason for the small amount of passing downfield? The
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I think
Yeah.
he's actually improved his footwork as he's gone. There are still instances where I like to see him push a little bit more, but he's a kid where uh, I know Tim Tebow, and I'm not trying to compare. They're not really the same kind of quarterback. But Tim Tebow, quarterback coach, came in and they didn't want him climbing the pocket. They told him, "Don't do it. We want you being able to do all your stuff." Where I guess to a degree that has some validity, but I think if you're going to be consistent at the position and achieve the type of goals he wants to achieve, where it was, here at Michigan or later on, you're going to have to be fundamentally sound to do it. And I think this kid has made some progress in that regard. He came in without a start and was used to being the whole show and having to turn plays into circuses to make them work. And he's done some of that here, but you just got to be smart about it and do everything you do with a fundamental foundation. And then if you have to improv, do what you got to do. But I think he's made some progress that way.
Zach Swank says, "Hey, Alan, I'll get a few more in. I got a few more in. We've already gone over an hour getting you ready for the game." But says, "Hey, Al, I feel part of our offense that hasn't been there as well is letting our guy try to win one-on-one matchups down the field, same in the red zone. Uh, so we feel it's philosophy or confidence. I think, do we feel it's philosophy or confidence that they don't just do more 50-50 balls like we're definitely going to see Michigan State do? They did a what is a
Yeah.
fade ball to Reed to win the Wisconsin game."
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good question because how often do you want to throw up that 50-50 ball, and would you rather throw a shallow cross,
Mhm.
right? Or would you rather throw a dig and not risk a 50-50 ball where 50% of the time you may win and 50 you won't, or depending on who you're throwing it to, that could be higher or lower, right? But or you're going to want to run another running play. you know, those are the decisions you make as a play caller. And that's how you coach the quarterback sometimes. And I don't think Michigan is like Ohio State, for example, or even Michigan State, where they're saying, "Hey, you get singled up, press over there, take it right now." No, they're going to say, "Hand the ball to Blake Corman, move to the next play. We'll get down there, and when the opportunity presents itself, I'll give you a shot at some 50-50 ball." But that's not really their game. That's not. I don't think that's how they coach it because I don't see a lot of balls go up in those situations. But I'll be damned, you see it from other teams. You see it from other teams, and some of those are won, some of those are lost. But you just got to philosophically decide: do you want to take that fade, or do you want to check the ball down, throw a shallow cross, or call another run? And I
So
think
Al,
it
you
leans
talked
towards the latter.
you talked about how you've watched their games and they do something different defensively, coverage wise, every single game. Seem to have mastered none of them, right? But they keep throwing different stuff out. But Minnesota and Wisconsin, you said they played a lot of one high in those games, right?
Yes, yes,
It would seem to me, Al, and getting to this question, that that's probably what they're gonna do in this game. Say, hey man, we gotta stop the run.
yeah,
The question from Mark Edwards is, what type of defense can we expect to see from Michigan State to defend the run? I'd like to hear about the X's and O's from Al.
yeah. I would my guess, and you're not going to get this defense every snap, but you're going to get a tendency. I think Michigan State knows that they have to stop the run. I mean, they just saw what happened. I mean, they just got ran 418 yards against the top 10 team, and they are not a top 10 team. What's their best chance to stop the run is add numbers. Add numbers by bringing people down into the box with one high looks and press out the wide receivers. Okay, press out the wide receivers. So um, that would be my guess. Will they mix in some quarters coverage? They might. You might get a little bit. And then they're not afraid to press from that either. But my tendency, I tend to think they want to get that extra guy, that extra number that's either going to force you to run through or RPO. That add in dude to help them stop the run. If I were them, that's how I think because Michigan is just too good a running team. Uh, I'd try to find out if JJ McCarthy is going to be the player of the game or not.
Yeah, look at
If
this.
that makes any sense.
Rick is on point. Sam bleeds blue, the gorgeous one bleeds football. I would say that's an accurate assessment.
Well, that's a baseball stadium in my background. There, just so you know, I have more to me than football, but yeah, when push comes to shove, I probably bleed football. But you know, uh, you got to be something in life, Sam. I decided to be a football coach from the time I was 19 years old, and And that's what I've done. And some of it's been good. Most of it's been good. Some of it not so good. But let me tell you something. It got me up every day, and I never checked my watch to see what time it was, because as far as I was concerned, I was never working. And I'm retired now, and I'm still not working because I have a blast doing this stuff, even if I got to work with you.
All right. That one almost got by me. Feelings mutual, Al. I must say. I mean, I got long Mondays.
Oh God, I know.
Devin
I
for
did. I can't.
most
We
of the
didn't go
morning.
Monday, and I was so happy. I went a whole day, a whole Monday, and never saw you once. It was
Yeah, man,
great.
it's crazy. Crazy how that works. Well, folks, listen, I know I didn't get to some of your questions. I apologize that we can never get to all of them in this one, but we'll make up for it with the breakdown of what Al, I think you're predicting to be a victory. If I can infer from your commentary here, you think Michigan's gonna win, right?
Well, I'm going. I'm going. I got to do a book signing down in Auburn. I'm not going to be at this game. Okay. So, and last time I left to go to the Iron Bowl last year, and Michigan played Ohio State and drubbed them. I got a feeling the same thing's going to happen. They don't need me to win. I promise you that. So, my guess, Auburn plays at 11 o'clock in the morning. I think they called this game the Cereal Bowl. Uh, but that means Michigan plays at night, right? So I'm going to have a chance to watch that, and I cannot wait. So hopefully, Sam, when we hit Monday, we'll have some good stuff, some juicy stuff to look at. Man, I can't wait.
Yeah, so you're going down for this book signing down in Auburn. Kenzel 3 said he bought your book and it's great. Do you happen to have one of your books around, Al
I do
Borges?
right here. But see, I don't want to see. I put this up. I always have a little bit of trepidation because this is a Michigan deal, okay? And this is when I coached at Auburn, okay? But I do have all Michigan references in it, and Lloyd Carr recommended the book. Lloyd read it before anybody else. I gave it to Lloyd. I go, Lloyd, if you like it, give me a recommendation. If you don't, and I won't. My feelings won't be hurt. But he's read it. He loved it, and I put him. I said, I'm putting you in the back of the boat, man. You're my man. So you can contribute to the Al Borges Retirement Fund by buying my book. And if you're a football nut, it doesn't matter who it's about. So, and let me tell you, there's some football nuts on this show.
Yeah, there are. And you got some Denard and Devin in there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I talk about both of them. Denard, particularly because I contrast coaching Denard Robinson to coaching Jason Campbell, which is completely different. So I have a piece in the book where I talk about that. I think people will find compelling. So, and I talk about the rivalries, because the biggest question I get in coaching going away is what's the bigger rivalry, Michigan, Ohio State, or Auburn, Alabama? Because those are the two, I mean, there's other great ones, but those usually are the first two mentioned. And so I talk about that in the book. And don't ask me to say anything now because I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, you've been in all of them, Al.
Yeah,
Oregon State. You've been in
yeah,
Cal, Stanford,
yeah.
USC,
Cal Stanford.
UCLA.
I was at Cal Stanford when we lateraled all the balls and ran through the band back in 1982. That's how old I am. John Elway was the quarterback. I was at USC, UCLA when John Robinson and Paul Hackett were the coaches. And we won 8 in a row, which they haven't done since. I was at Alabama and Auburn. We won every year I was there. I'm 5-0 against Alabama, 4 wins, and then one when we beat them when I was at UCLA my last year. So
Well,
I
damn it,
told
Al.
I told Gus Malzahn, I go, I haven't lost a game to Alabama, and I hadn't until I went to Michigan. Gus says they ought to erect a statue to you, man.
Man, I see. I always knew Tommy Tuberville was a bit of an idiot. He went 5-0 against Alabama, and he decided to move on. What the hell is right? See, I knew. Don't cover your face.
You
Hey,
said
man,
that, not
I
me.
think the dude is kind of challenged with his intelligence or lack thereof. That's just my opinion. We let it all hang out on this show, Al Borges.
Oh
Anyway,
no, and I talk about all that in the book too. It's interesting. So yeah, I think the Michigan fans will enjoy the book, and especially the guys that have watched the show and have got to know you and I. They'll get a kick out of it because there's some great stories. Some of them are hilarious.
all right. Well, folks, hope you enjoyed this breakdown. Gave you, how we think Michigan will attack Michigan State. Obviously, how Al would do it, and what to watch out for. If you missed any aspect of it, obviously it'll be up on the YouTube page. We'll transcribe some of it. The way you can support the channel is be sure to like the video. Be sure to subscribe to the video channel. That way, Every time we do a new video, you'll get a notification alerting you to it. Of course, you can always subscribe to our podcast channel as well, as this goes on the podcast channel. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, you name it. And then, of course, where it all goes down over on the MichiganInsider.com, that is where you can really support us the best. That's where all of our content is. That's where we're covering a big visit weekend where you got a couple of 5-stars going to be on campus. Couple of your 5-star quarterback Jaden Davis going to be here. 5-star defensive lineman Justin Scott going to be here. A couple of top 247 offensive linemen going to be here. Marion Stewart, one of their top receiver prospects in 2024, going to be here. It's going to be a huge visit weekend. That's just a sampling of the guys that are going to be in the house. We'll cover them all over on the MichiganInsider.com. $1 get you in your first month. So be sure to subscribe over at TMI. That'll do it for us here for now. Be sure to join us in a couple of hours as we'll be back with Vance Bedford breaking down the defensive side of the ball as they match up with Michigan State's offense. Until then, we'll see you next time on the next edition of the Michigan Football Breakdown, focused on the offense with Al Borges.
Go Blue.